Welcome to a new season of Words on Music for the Anchorage Symphony Orchestra. I'm Susan Wingrove-Reed. I'm the principal keyboard player in the symphony and also have been doing pre-concert chats and writing program notes for decades now for the symphony. And it's really a lot of fun to always learn more about the music that we will be playing. So let's dive in. Opening on our concert coming up is a piece by a living female composer, Stephanie Berg, called Ravish and Mayhem, one of the best titles I've ever written about or researched about. And it was written for a new music group called Alarm Will Sound. They were a group of Eastman music students that joined forces together to try to present more contemporary music. And now the group has evolved into an ongoing ensemble based in New York City with professional musicians. Berg recalled that the inspiration for Ravish and Mayhem was somewhat random. While she was on a car trip, she said, maybe I was having a case of highway hypnosis, and we've all had those experiences on freeways. But it was composed in 2012. And in her imaginations, she said she saw an Arabian street festival full of energy and excitement. The music is rich with folk melodies. And she said it's as if you could see a person walking from scene to scene as you listen to the music that is observing street performers, dancers, lovers, maybe even elephants at the end. And it's chaotic and maybe a little bawdy, full of excitement. It's not a sit in the concert hall or royal dining hall kind of piece. It's more like feasting on street food treats in a musical sense, with an orchestra full of power and bold colors and the loud brass and percussion. Very gratifying. She said a colleague reacted to the piece by saying, you know what? This is the kind of music that makes me want to take my clothes off. Well, I don't recommend that behavior in the Atwood Concert Hall, but I think you're really going to enjoy the excitement of this piece as we dive into our new season with music director Elizabeth Schultz. Now, the program is going to have a lot of Spanish influences and Latin influences and folk melodies. And the second piece on the concert by French composer Chabrier is a piece called Espana. Now, he lived in Paris. He played when he was a kid, piano, violin, loved to read, and he composed as a child, but pursued the study of law and entered civil service, guided by his father. And he spent 20 years working for the government, writing and playing music after work hours. But in the year 1880, he went to see a Wagner opera, Tristan and Isolde, and he had traveled with a friend to Munich. And he came home to Paris and resigned from his job in 1881 and was hired immediately as a conductor for a new music ensemble. And he became finally a professional musician. He took a 6-month vacation to Spain in 1882, which led to his writing the piece Espana, which became his most famous work. Originally, it was a piano solo, and then he orchestrated it. Inspired by the Spanish people and their exuberance, he was totally enchanted during his vacation. This is a fusion of Spanish dances and folk songs, but in his own voice. Two vibrant dances are featured, one the malagueña, a more sultry dance, and the jota, which is a fast and fiery waltz, romantic at heart. Espana is also subtitled A Rhapsody for Orchestra. It's very sensuous, full of perpetual motion, brilliance, and sparkling writing for the instruments, and it was a huge hit from its premiere. His goal was to compose an extraordinary fantasia that would excite the audience to feverish excitement. So I think this is an appropriate follow up to Ravish and Mayhem. And he said he hoped that people would leap from their seats and embrace each other after hearing the piece. Now, that behavior might be a little more welcome than what we talked about for the first piece, but nevertheless, the excitement is going to be palpable. Mahler, in the early 20th century, observed when he was conducting the New York Philharmonic that this piece was, in his opinion, the start of modern music. In 1956, Some of you may remember or know of the vocal artist Perry Como. He had a hit song called Hot Diggity Dog Ziggity Boom, which was based on a melody from this piece. We're in for a real treat. The return of an artist that enchanted those of us who were around some years ago, Sharon Isbin, classical guitarist. And she will be featured in two incredible works at the opening night concert for the symphony. First, Rodrigo's Concerto de Aranjuez. And wow, this is maybe the most epic piece ever written for the guitar, and it's one of the most famous concertos for any instrument of all time. It's a real stunner of the 20th century, rich with Spanish romanticism. Rodrigo is a beloved Spanish composer. He was blind from the age of 3 after he had an episode of diphtheria. He studied the violin and the piano as a kid, and then he moved to Paris to study composition in 1927, where he also studied musicology. He had a wonderful career as a music history professor and as a critic when he moved home to Spain, and also he composed. He lived a very long life and explored traditional Spanish harmonies and melodies with French influences. In 1938, on his honeymoon with his wife, he recalled a memorable dinner with guitarist Regino Sainz de la Mazza. And he said, "We ate well, and the wine was not bad at all," led to audacious fantasizing and the idea of a guitar concerto. More wine, and I agreed, yes, I will write it. And 2 months later, in a small apartment in the Latin Quarter, he began to draft the work. And the theme of the stunning adagio came later. It's the most famous movement in the music. And he was also inspired by the gardens at the Royal Palace in Aranjuez, which was built in 16th century and then revised as a garden in the 18th century. The concerto had its Barcelona premiere in the year 1940. And it was said of him that the sightless composer knew the gardens well, the fragrances of the magnolias, the singing of birds, and the gushing fountains. Our soloist for the Rodrigo and also the work that will follow after the intermission, Sharon Isbin, was recently inducted into the Guitar Foundation of the American Hall of Fame. And she's also a multiple Grammy winner. So you are in for a real treat if you have never seen or heard her perform before. The Rodrigo Concerto is extremely popular and has been featured in a lot of film scores and is played everywhere in the world. There's a rhythmic spirit in the first movement, a dialogue of the guitar, and a variety of solo instruments in the orchestra in the exquisite slow movement. And then the piece ends with a courtly dance that will send you sailing off into the intermission. Opening night continues with the guitar and a piece that's fairly new by Chris Brubeck, who is a favorite of Anchorage Symphony audiences for his collaborations with our beloved previous maestro, Randall Craig Fleischer, and a piece that many of you may remember called Spontaneous Combustion, which featured violinist Nick Kendall. Now, he wrote this concerto for Sharon Isbin called Affinity in 2015. And his wife, Trish, came up with the title when the definition became clear that an affinity is an attraction of forces between particles that cause them to combine. And this relates very much to the mode of composition of this piece and the collaboration between Sharon and Chris. It's in one movement, around 16 minutes long, and it starts with the wonderful energy, as Chris said, of like a downhill ski race. And then there are early jazz style hints that kind of sound like ragtime, and then a romantic, fiery waltz with oceanic qualities. The middle of the piece is a heartfelt tribute to his dad, the famous jazz legend Dave Brubeck, who had recently passed. And Sharon had asked Chris if he had a favorite melody of his dad's that he might be interested in exploring to feature in this commission for her. So it's mellow and Chopin haunted, and it's the original melody was called Autumn in Our Town. And this is an exquisite centerpiece to this new concerto. The end of the piece is a whirling dance. The premiere was given by Sharon and Elizabeth Schultz and the Maryland Symphony Orchestra, and they also did the recording that is the premiere recording. So help yourselves if you're interested in hearing it in advance and certainly as a follow-up. It's intriguing and emotionally moving with foot tapping Brazilian and Middle Eastern vibes. And Rodrigo is never very far away as you listen to this. Opening night of our new season will conclude with a fan and musician favorite by Leonard Bernstein, his symphonic dances from West Side Story. I can't wait to see the new biopic movie about him that just got open to rave reviews in Europe and it will be soon unveiled in America. This incredible composer, conductor, pianist, teacher, mentor, media personality, he was a music celebrity, one of a kind, with a passion for music and life. And West Side Story, his 1957 musical, will be with us forever. There are still countless productions every year all over the world and several film adaptations. In 1961, Bernstein chose 9 sections of the show to create a symphonic suite, an orchestral suite for a fundraiser for the New York Philharmonic Pension Fund. The film score had just been finished, and the team had suggested some of these highlights. The sections are not in the order of the show, but instead present a musical journey with no interruptions. The word symphonic is not because it's arranged for orchestra, but Bernstein stated that it's because the sections within it grew from specific themes and reflect symphonic moods and emotions. West Side Story took Broadway's breath away with its focus on social issues and its incredible fusion of musics. It forever changed the trajectory of musicals in America with its fusion of jazz, dance, storytelling, Latino influences. It's contemporary and timeless with great tunes, and it's extremely cool. It's a harsh ballad about New York City, featuring wild, deadly rhythms with haunting and stunning melodies. And it will cap off our opening night in a memorable fashion and send you out wanting more so that you'll return for our second classic in November. So looking forward to you joining us for live orchestral music with your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra on opening night. See you there. I also wanted to invite you to consider coming early to your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra concerts this year, because for the first time since COVID, we're going to reactivate our live pre-concert chats in the Atwood Hall, starting at 6:30 p.m. and going until 7. So it'll give you a chance to get great parking and get settled before the concert. And I will take you on a more comprehensive journey than on our Zoom interviews about the programming and the composers and the music. So join us for Words on Music, revived finally after COVID, and hope to see you in attendance if you can give us the time, and we'll have some great adventures together learning more.